Have you ever had someone in a position of power tell you that legal documents are just suggestions? Have you ever watched someone abuse their authority while thinking they're untouchable? Well, this is my story, and I guarantee that when the bank's fiduciary audit froze my brother's access to our family trust, his face told the whole story. My name is Rebecca. I'm 34 years old, and I'm a tax attorney at one of Chicago's largest law firms. I specialize in estate planning and fiduciary law, which means I know exactly how trusts are supposed to work for the past 6 years. My older brother David has been the trustee of our family's $12 million trust fund, established by our late grandfather. To David, I'm just the spoiled little sister who doesn't understand real business compared to him. What he didn't know was that I understood fiduciary law better than he ever would, and that very soon, a bank audit would prove exactly who was really abusing our grandfather's trust. This story begins with what should have been a simple request for a legitimate distribution from our family trust. But it turned into the day I discovered that my brother had been treating our grandfather's carefully crafted legal document like his personal piggy bank. I had been saving money for years to buy my first home. As a tax attorney, I made good money, but Chicago real estate prices meant I needed a substantial down payment to get the kind of place I wanted. That's when I remembered the trust. Our grandfather, William Morrison, had been a successful real estate developer who built a fortune worth over $50 million. When he died 8 years ago, he established a trust for his grandchildren, me and David, with very specific terms about how the money could be used. The trust document was crystal clear. Funds could be distributed for education, healthcare, home purchases, business investments with approval, and other beneficial purposes that promote the long-term financial security of the beneficiaries. Buying a home was explicitly listed as an approved use. I needed $150,000 for a down payment on a beautiful townhouse in Lincoln Park. It was a solid investment in a great neighborhood, and exactly the kind of purchase Grandpa would have approved of. So I called David to request the distribution. Hey David, I need to talk to you about the trust. What about it? I'm buying a house, and I need a distribution for the down payment. How much? $150. There was a pause. That's a lot of money, Rebecca. It's for a house, David. That's specifically allowed under the trust terms. I know what the trust says, but I'm the trustee, and I have discretion over distributions, discretion within the terms of the trust. Home purchases are explicitly approved. Rebecca, you don't understand how these things work. Just because something is written in the trust doesn't mean it's mandatory. What do you mean? I mean, the trust document is more like a suggestion. Guidelines. As trustee, I have the authority to make decisions based on what I think is best for the beneficiaries. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. David, the trust isn't a suggestion. It's a legal document with binding terms. Look, Rebecca, you're a lawyer, but you don't understand business. I've been managing this trust for 6 years, and I know what's best for our family's money. Managing it how? Making smart investments, growing the principal, protecting our future. But I'm asking for a distribution that's explicitly allowed, and I'm telling you that I don't think it's a good idea right now. Why not? Because the market is volatile, and we need to preserve capital. David, the trust has $12 million. A 1500 distribution won't hurt it. Every dollar matters. Rebecca, you wouldn't understand. That phrase, you wouldn't understand, was something David had been saying to me my entire life. When we were kids, it was you wouldn't understand. You're just a girl. In college, it was you wouldn't understand. You're studying liberal arts. Now it was you wouldn't understand. You don't do business. But here's the thing. I did understand. I understood fiduciary law better than David ever would. To understand why this conversation was so frustrating, you need to know the history of our family trust and David's attitude toward it. When Grandpa established the trust, he was very specific about his intentions. He had seen too many wealthy families destroy themselves through poor financial decisions and family infighting. The trust was designed to provide security and opportunity for his grandchildren, while preventing them from squandering the family fortune. The document was 47 pages long and extremely detailed. It specified exactly what kinds of distributions were allowed, under what circumstances, and with what approval processes. Home purchases were not only allowed, they were encouraged, as long as they were for primary residences and represented sound investments. David was named as trustee primarily because he was older, but also because he had an MBA and was running several of the family's business interests. At the time, it seemed like a logical choice. But over the years, David had developed his own interpretation of what the trust meant. The trust gives me broad discretionary authority, he would say. Whenever anyone questioned his decisions, Grandpa trusted me to make the right choices for our family. I have to think about the long-term implications of every distribution. The problem was, David's discretionary authority was supposed to be exercised within the clear parameters Grandpa had established. It wasn't supposed to be a license to ignore the trust's explicit terms, but David saw it differently. To him, being trustee meant he was essentially the owner of the trust assets, with the power to distribute or withhold money based on his personal judgment. Rebecca doesn't understand the responsibility I carry, he would tell our parents. Every decision I make affects our family's future. I have to be the bad guy sometimes, but that's what leadership means. Grandpa chose me because he knew I would make the tough decisions. What David didn't mention was that his tough decisions often seemed to benefit him more than anyone else. 3 years ago, when I had asked for a $25,000 distribution to pay off my law school loans, education expenses were explicitly covered. David had refused. "You make good money now," he had said. "You can pay off your own loans." But the trust specifically covers educational expenses. Past educational expenses. You're done with school, David. Student loans are a direct result of educational expenses. That's not how I interpret it. 2 years ago, when I had wanted $50,000 to invest in a colleague's law practice, business investments were allowed with trustee approval. David had again refused. "It's too risky," he had said. "You haven't even looked at the business plan." "I don't need to. I know what's best for our money." But somehow, David always found reasons to approve distributions for himself. Last year, he had taken $200,000 for what he called business development opportunities. When I asked for details, he said it was confidential and that I wouldn't understand the complexities. 6 months ago, he had taken another $150,000 for investment diversification. And just 3 months ago, he had approved a $100,000 distribution to himself for family business expansion. Meanwhile, I hadn't received a single distribution in 6 years, despite multiple requests for legitimate, trust-approved expenses. After David refused my request for the house down payment, I decided to do what any good lawyer would do. I researched. I pulled out my copy of the trust document and read through it carefully. Then I researched fiduciary law, trustee responsibilities, and beneficiary rights. What I found was disturbing. According to Illinois trust law, trustees have a fiduciary duty to follow the terms of the trust document. They can't simply ignore explicit provisions because they disagree with them. Their discretion is supposed to be exercised within the parameters established by the trust creator, not instead of those parameters. More importantly, trustees have a duty of loyalty. They can't use trust assets for their own benefit, and they can't make decisions based on their own interests rather than the beneficiaries' interests. David's pattern of approving distributions for himself while denying them for me looked like a clear violation of his fiduciary duties, but I needed more information. As a beneficiary, I had the right to request accounting information from the trust, so I sent David a formal letter requesting detailed financial statements for the past 3 years. "Why do you need this?" he asked when he called me after receiving the letter. "Because I'm a beneficiary, and I have the right to know how the trust is being managed." "Rebecca, you don't trust me." "This isn't about trust, David, it's about transparency. I've been managing this trust perfectly well for 6 years. Then you shouldn't have any problem providing the accounting. It's complicated financial information. You wouldn't understand most of it. I'm a tax attorney, David. I think I can handle financial statements." Reluctantly, David provided the information, and what I found was shocking. Over the past 3 years, David had taken $650,000 in distributions for himself, but more concerning were the investment decisions he had been making. The trust had originally been invested in conservative, diversified portfolios, exactly what Grandpa had specified, but David had been moving money into increasingly risky investments, cryptocurrency, penny stocks, options trading, and something called alternative investment opportunities that I couldn't identify. Trust's value had declined from $12 million to $8.5 million over the past 2 years. David had been gambling with our family's money, and he was losing. But the worst part was what I found when I dug deeper into those alternative investment opportunities. They weren't investments at all. They were loans to David's own companies, David had been borrowing money from the trust to cover losses in his personal business ventures. Money that was supposed to be protected for the beneficiaries was being used to prop up his failing enterprises. That's when I realized that David's refusal to give me distributions wasn't about protecting the trust, it was about hiding what he had done to it. Armed with this information, I made a decision that would change everything. I called Morrison Trust Company, the bank that served as the institutional co-trustee of our family trust. While David was the primary trustee, the bank had oversight responsibilities and the authority to intervene if there were problems. Morrison Trust Company, this is Janet speaking. Hi, this is Rebecca Morrison. I'm a beneficiary of the William Morrison Family Trust. How can I help you today? I need to speak with someone about potential fiduciary violations by the primary trustee. Let me transfer you to Mr. Williams, our fiduciary compliance officer. 5 minutes later, I was talking to Robert Williams, a man who had been handling trust compliance issues for over 20 years. Ms. Morrison, what seems to be the problem? I explained the situation. David's refusal to make legitimate his pattern of self-dealing, the risky investments, and the loans to his own companies. Do you have documentation of these issues? Mr. Williams asked. Yes, I have the trust accounting statements, bank records, and evidence of the unauthorized loans. Ms. Morrison, what you're describing sounds like serious fiduciary violations. We'll need to investigate immediately. What does that mean? It means we're going to conduct a comprehensive audit of the trust's management. During that audit, we'll freeze all distributions and investment changes until we can determine the extent of any problems. How long will that take? Typically 60 to 90 days for a full fiduciary audit. And if you find violations, then we'll take appropriate action, which could include removing the trustee, requiring restitution, and referring the matter to law enforcement if necessary. I gave Mr. Williams all the documentation I had gathered, and he promised to begin the audit immediately. Ms. Morrison, he said before we hung up, I want you to know that you did the right thing by bringing this to our attention. Protecting trust beneficiaries is our primary responsibility. 2 days later, David called me, furious. Rebecca, what did you do? What do you mean? The bank called me. They're conducting some kind of audit of the trust. Really? Why would they do that? Don't play dumb with me. You called them, didn't you? I exercised my rights as a beneficiary to request oversight of trust management. You went behind my back. I followed proper legal procedures to protect our family's assets. There's nothing wrong with how I've been managing the trust. Then you have nothing to worry about. Rebecca, this is going to cause problems for the whole family. The only problems it's going to cause are for people who have been violating their fiduciary duties. I haven't violated anything. David, you've been loaning trust money to your own companies. That's textbook self-dealing. Those are legitimate investments. Loans to entities you control, without beneficiary approval, are not legitimate investments. You don't understand the complexities. I understand fiduciary law, David, and what you've been doing is illegal. David hung up on me. Over the next month, the bank's audit team worked methodically through 3 years of trust records. They brought in forensic accountants, investment analysts, and legal experts to examine every transaction. During this time, David was completely frozen out of trust management. He couldn't make distributions, couldn't change investments, and couldn't access any trust funds. This is ridiculous, he complained to our parents. Rebecca is destroying our family over money. She's just trying to buy a house, our mother said. It's not about the house, it's about control. She's always been jealous that Grandpa chose me as trustee. Maybe you should just give her the money for the house, our father suggested. I can't. The bank has frozen everything. Why did they freeze it? Because Rebecca made false accusations about how I've been managing the trust, but they weren't false accusations. And the audit was proving that. 6 weeks into the audit, Mr. Williams called me with an update. Ms. Morrison, I wanted to give you a preliminary report on our findings. What did you discover? Significant fiduciary violations. Your brother has been using trust assets inappropriately, making unauthorized loans to his own entities, and engaging in investment strategies that violate the trust's conservative mandate. How much money are we talking about? Approximately 2.1 million in plus another 1.8 million in investment losses from inappropriate risk-taking. So the trust has lost almost $4 million. That's correct. And that's just what we've found so far. What happens now? We're going to complete the audit and then make recommendations to the probate court. Your brother will likely be removed as trustee, and will seek restitution for the misappropriated funds. Can he pay it back? That remains to be seen. We're also investigating the financial condition of his companies that received the unauthorized loans. 2 weeks later, the audit was complete, and the results were devastating for David. The bank had found evidence of systematic fiduciary violations spanning 3 years. David had treated the trust like his personal bank account, taking money whenever his businesses needed cash, and making investment decisions based on his own interests rather than the beneficiaries' interests. The final meeting was scheduled for a Friday afternoon at the bank's downtown office. David, his lawyer, me, my lawyer, and the bank's trust officers would all be present. David arrived, looking confident, apparently believing he could talk his way out of the situation. "I'm sure we can resolve this misunderstanding," he told Mr. Williams as we sat down in the conference room. "Mr. Morrison," Mr. Williams replied, "this isn't a misunderstanding. This is a systematic pattern of fiduciary violations. I've been managing this trust successfully for 6 years. You've been mismanaging this trust for 3 years. Let me read you some of our findings." Mr. Williams opened a thick folder and began reading. Unauthorized loan to Morrison Development LLC, $450,000. Unauthorized Lendonsham, $320,000. Unauthorized loan to Morrison Ventures, $280,000. High-risk cryptocurrency interest, $890,000 in losses. Unauthorized personal distributions, $650,000. David's face was getting redder with each item. "Those weren't unauthorized. I have discretionary authority." "Mr. Morrison, discretionary authority doesn't mean you can ignore the trust's explicit terms. It doesn't mean you can loan money to yourself. And it certainly doesn't mean you can gamble with beneficiary assets. I was trying to grow the trust. You were trying to save your failing businesses with trust money. That's called self-dealing, and it's a violation of your fiduciary duties." David's lawyer whispered something to him. "What are the bank's David's lawyer asked. "Immediate removal as trustee, full restitution of misappropriated funds, and referral to the state attorney general for potential criminal charges." David went pale. "Criminal charges? Fiduciary theft is a felony in Illinois. Mr. Morrison, I didn't steal anything. I was managing the trust. You took $2.1 million of trust money for your own use. What would you call that?" The room was silent for a long moment. "Mr. Morrison," Mr. Williams continued, "you have 30 days to begin restitution payments. If you cannot make full restitution, we'll be forced to seize assets, including any property purchased with trust funds. I don't have $2.1 million. Then you'll need to liquidate assets, sell your companies, sell your house, sell whatever you need to sell to make the beneficiaries whole. This will destroy me financially. You should have thought of that before you violated your fiduciary duties." After the meeting, David approached me in the parking garage. "Rebecca, you've destroyed our family." "I protected our family, David. I was trying to grow the trust. You were stealing from the trust. Those were legitimate business investments. Loans to your own companies are not legitimate investments. You don't understand the pressure I was under. I understand that you violated your fiduciary duties and stole from your sister. What do you want from me? I want you to pay back the money you stole. And I want you to understand that being a trustee is a responsibility, not an opportunity." "And then what? Will you forgive me?" "Maybe, but you'll never be trustee again." 6 months later, the probate court officially removed David as trustee and appointed the bank as sole trustee until a new individual trustee could be found. David was forced to sell his house, liquidate his businesses, and turn over most of his personal assets to make restitution to the trust. He managed to pay back about $1.4 million, but the remaining $700,000 was written off as a loss. The state attorney general decided not to pursue criminal charges, but David was banned from serving as a fiduciary in Illinois. I was appointed as the new individual trustee, working alongside the bank's institutional oversight. My first act as trustee was to approve my own $150,000 distribution for the house down payment. My second act was to restructure the trust's investments according to Grandpa's original conservative mandate. My third act was to establish clear policies for future ensuring that all beneficiaries would be treated fairly and according to the trust's terms. The trust's value has since recovered to over $10 million, and it's growing steadily under proper management. David and I rarely speak now. He blames me for destroying his life, but I know I saved our family's financial future. The most important thing I learned from this experience is that legal documents aren't suggestions, they're binding commitments that must be honored. When my brother said that trust was just a suggestion, he revealed that he fundamentally misunderstood his role as a fiduciary. He thought being trustee gave him ownership of the assets, when in reality it gave him the responsibility to protect them for the beneficiaries. Bank's fiduciary audit didn't just freeze his access, it exposed years of violations that could have eventually destroyed our entire family inheritance. Sometimes, the best way to protect your family is to hold family members accountable when they abuse positions of trust, and sometimes, the person who doesn't understand business is actually the one who understands the law well enough to stop the real damage from continuing. My brother thought he was untouchable because he was the trustee, but when the bank read the audit results, he discovered that fiduciary duties aren't optional. They're legally enforceable obligations that come with serious consequences when violated. The look on his face when he realized he owed $2.1 million in restitution was something I'll never forget. But more than that, I'll never forget the feeling of knowing that I had protected our grandfather's legacy from someone who was supposed to be its guardian.